Hello and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. On March 13th, 2019, I released the episode of And the Runner-Up Is on the 1972 Best Picture race, where we discussed Cabaret as the likely runner-up that lost Best Picture to The Godfather. But on second thought, what if the runner-up was really The Emigrants? Hello, and welcome back to On Second Thought, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that we did not cover as the runner-up on the main show, and discuss whether it may have actually been the runner-up. I am Kevin Jacobson, of course, and we are revisiting 1972 today. And on the main show, I said that Cabaret was the runner-up to The Godfather, but we are discussing if it actually could have been another epic film, The Emigrants. We will have the discussion. I know people are saying Cabaret already won 8 Oscars. Like, it's obviously the runner-up, but we will have the discussion. So my first guest has been on Second Thought before for the episode on Sense and Sensibility. He is a host of the 1 Inch Barrier podcast, which breaks down the international film category at the Oscars. Please welcome back to the show, Juan Carlos Ojano.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say that I apologize for the last time because I wasn't making a lot of sense with a Sense and Sensibility episode. I was like overworked, like sleepless. But I'm excited because I got good sleep now and to talk about a 3-hour film. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, happy to have you back, especially for a rare international film making it into Best Picture.
Ooh.
And I'm so excited to bring on my other guest for the very first time. Many people know him on film Twitter as Fritz and the Oscars. He makes great videos on YouTube about Best Actress races of the past, something right up my alley. Welcome to the show for the first time, Fritz.
Woo, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
Yes.
I'm so happy to do this with the two of you.
Yes, me too. Yes, I think we'll have a very interesting discussion here. So are we ready to just jump right in?
Okay.
Definitely.
I'm
Okay.
ready.
Okay. So as a recap, The Emigrants, it is a Swedish epic drama about the Nilsson family, who are poor farmers living in Sweden. We have Karl Oskar and his wife Christina. Karl Oskar's brother is Robert, who is a farmhand and dreams of emigrating to America. Karl Oskar and Christina, they have a bunch of children, and then sort of a tragedy happens that ultimately leads to them agreeing to leave Sweden with Robert to America. They also have an uncle, Daniel, who is religious but isn't really allowed to practice, so he goes with them too. So do a bunch of others in the community, and they go on the very perilous journey to America together. So the film was directed by Jan Troell, who co-wrote the screenplay with Ben Forsland, adapting it from the book of the same name by Wilhelm Moberg. Max von Sydow stars as Karl Oskar, Liv Ullmann as Christina, Eddie Axberg as Robert, Alan Edwall as Daniel, Monica Zetterlund, Pierre Lindstedt, Hans Alfredson, Ella Smitty, and a whole bunch of others. So The Emigrants made $1 million at the US box office. It was nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar the year before, and then it was nominated for 4 Oscars in 1972, but did not win any of them, unfortunately. So let's start first with the guy who's very used to talking about international films. Let's go to Carlos here. What are your thoughts on The Emigrants?
I mean, I'm way too used to it already. Just like give me English films. I'm just kidding.
Yes, I apologize.
No, but I would take every chance to speak about it, and especially with The Emigrants being one of the few non-English language films to actually make it to picture. And it's always interesting for me because I think with how Hollywood centric the Oscars was and is, and for a reason, it is done in the United States. It always interests me how could a non-English language film cross over, and with the Emigrants, I'm still not sure how, but with my feelings towards it, interestingly, because I first saw this a few months ago for my podcast, I saw first the sequel, the New
Oh,
Land, because I'm going
right,
backwards.
right.
So I saw the New Land first, and then the Emigrants. But with this one, it's the kind of film that you really have to sit with it. It's a kind of film that invests so much, even in the most dramatically insignificant, but focuses on details of life. And since it is about emigration, it is as focused on the journey towards the realization that one needs to leave their place, their country, as to the actual journey, like on the sea. And I find it very fascinating because it doesn't just make the emigration a spectacle as it could have
Mm.
been, but it makes it something deeper. There is already an emotional dislocation that happens even before the actual dislocation of one person. And the film focuses on that process with patience. That is not going to be for everyone. And this is the kind of film where I think you really have to be in the mood to be able to settle in. Otherwise, it just won't work for you. Or you would feel that, what is the point of this? It is 3 hours, 12 minutes. But if one finds the perfect match, like the perfect physical condition, perfect emotional headspace, perfect setup, then and the commitment to go with this journey with the characters starting their own journey, I think the viewer will be on a treat with watching this one because it is our ride. It you cannot take it for granted once you watch it. You really have to invest. And I love those kinds of films that demand so much from the audience because it shows trust in the audience that you're going to be in for the ride. So I highly regard this film.
Nice. Yes, it's certainly a film that does require the audience to lean in a little bit to really appreciate it. But once you do, I do think it's very rewarding. So, Fritz, what are your thoughts on The Emigrants?
So that's a tough act to follow from Carlos. To get right down to the point, I loved it. Probably because this is my kind of movie. And the funny thing is, I don't think personally for me that I need to be in the mood for it because there is something about the way the movie is made and written and acted that draws me in very quickly. Even if the movie has a very slow pace, it never feels boring. But as Carlos said, it takes patience in developing the narrative and just showing you the life of these people without any sugarcoating or trying to make it more appealing, but simply how it is. And what I love about it, the movie in general, is that I have the feeling that usually when you have these kind of movies that show you people coming to America and starting a new life, probably because many of these movies are made in America, they always have this very cheerful tone. They are very positive. There's always this people are always very happy when they are on the ship. They cannot wait to get there. And here you really get this whole picture. You get this whole difficult process, just how long it takes to decide to leave your country and start your life completely new in a place you don't know. All the things you actually need to do to be able to get there. Things like paperwork and selling your stuff and just getting ahead, and how unpleasant this journey actually is. This is something that draws me completely into this because it gives a whole new perspective on this process where you think that you know a lot about this part of history, but seeing it from the point of these immigrants and how hard it is for them is, for me, something completely new and unexpected.
Yeah, yes, that's a very good point. I do think that this journey does tend to be romanticized by Hollywood for sure, and you can tell that there's a lot of care put into the actual physical toll that it takes to do this process. And for me, I don't know why, but going into watching this again, I was pretty intimidated. Like, I think the runtime and the subject matter, I guess I just remember it being more difficult to watch than it actually is. You know, even though you can certainly feel the 3 hours, I do think it is very well paced, and I wouldn't really cut too much down, honestly. Even the first part, where I think that whole section sort of gets the most criticism from people who don't really love the film. I think in a lot of ways this is a story of survival and finding strength in each other, and there's something very symbolic also in this story where, yes, we are getting to know these characters, but there's almost like a biblical quality, I find, to just how simple the story really is at its foundation. Like, it's very raw and very like elemental, and it kind of comes to represent the immigrant story, at least for, you know, Europeans coming to America. It's certainly not every immigrant story, but I think what really elevates the film to a higher level is how much it really humanizes these characters and doesn't really show them to be like extraordinary people or put them into these like stereotypical types. You know, these are just very ordinary people who are just trying to find their way to a better life, and they have their strong qualities and they have their weaker qualities. And I think also he could have made this like a grand sweeping sort of, you know, romanticized story that's really trying to beat you over the head with how like capital I important it is, and go in a more like heavy-handed approach. But he really keeps it kind of small, even though this is like an epic story. And I think he lets the story speak for itself and sort of lets the audience take their own meanings from it.
I do agree that, you know, with its runtime and the set pieces, it does feel small scale, but I think where it gets like the epicness of it is the emotional vastness of it, as if it applies to so many experiences, and I think the film gets that. It's interesting when you said that this is like kind of a demonstration of like a specific Swedish immigrant experience, but, you know, from a country where I'm working in another country, going to the United States, basically, leaving the country for a better life has been the goal. That is like a sign of a better life. I think the film does it so well in capturing those incremental character moments that lead someone towards a big decision. And I think, you know, with what you said, the criticisms of the first half, like it doesn't feel as streamlined with the journey. I don't think we will really understand why do they fight this fight in the second half if we didn't get the buildup of desperation. And desperation here isn't one miserable experience. It's a land that cannot be tilled. It's a landlord that is abusive. It's I don't know if a priest or minister that abuses his power. Mm-hmm. It's a pastor or priest not being able to practice his faith. It's these small things that build up. And I do appreciate how the film takes these seemingly scattershot moments to really bring us to the inevitable. Why would they go embark on this journey with no certainty? And at this point, this is my second viewing, it resonated with me so much, especially now. I think personally, I am currently in a crossroads. I'm seriously thinking of working abroad, and it's not one thing that makes you snap. It's small things that build up. And even if the film isn't necessarily trying to tug your heartstrings, it gets those emotional beats right, and it stings because of how close they feel, despite, you know, a white immigrant experience from a long time ago, centuries past. It still hits hard to this moment, like a few hours ago.
I think it's interesting that you say that the first half gets more criticism because I think for me, I actually like the first half more if I would have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's maybe just because personally for me, I love these kind of, you could maybe say slow stories that take their time to introduce the characters, to get an impression of how their life is, what they are doing. And I think this movie does this so well. Just as Carlos said, what all their daily chores or what they have to do, the misery that is coming step by step, the fact that the characters are not these one-dimensional stereotypes that you might expect it. Christina could very easily be this maybe a nagging shrew, but she is not. But she could also be, after the introduction, you could think she is more like this kind of free spirit when you see her swing on the swing. But she always is a balance between all these different things. And the brother is also not, you have him reading these books and learning about America. It might seem a little bit like a cliche that among these characters you have one who is a little bit more scientific and smarter than everybody else, but he's not really. He just has different dreams and ambitions. And the movie so greatly takes its time to establish and build these characters and show what their goals are, what their dreams are, and what they want, and how these things slowly shift because of what they are experienced daily. If I would apply some criticism, it might be that I think the story, the moment when their daughter dies, the scene itself is very gruesome. It felt a little bit for me too obvious over the head with how she dies, and then Christina is afterwards, okay, now I'm ready to go. I wish this had been a little bit more carefully developed like the rest of the storyline, but you understand where they are coming from and what makes their decisions. And this is why I enjoyed the first half, despite its slow pacing, very much.
Yeah.
I think that is what the main criticism is that some people feel that we're spending too long in this first section, which I understand, like, if you're not really getting into the story, how it can feel slow, and like they still haven't even gotten on the boat yet, and they haven't even gotten on the boat at the intermission point, and it's been 90 minutes. So like I understand, but I also think what's so smart about taking as much time as we do in Sweden is how it does contrast with everything that's about to come. Like, they're living in a somewhat difficult existence, but it is more peaceful, it's more slowed down. And I think for someone like Christina, who is, I think, more attached to her hometown, there's something kind of beautiful in that. But with Karl Oskar, he really sees it as stifling in a way, like he can't really reach his full potential. And kind of similar with Robert, who is just very idealistic, and he's such a dreamer, and reading all about like the iron and the gold in America and how there's so much abundance there that they can really take what they want and really be happy. I just think there's a lot of care that's put into showing these people for who they really are, I guess. How they're living this existence that is slower and more peaceful, but also really not going anywhere. Like, they don't have a bright future necessarily. And another part of it, I think, is this repeated theme of lords and masters that Robert's really sort of fixated on. And I think part of what he's so attracted to about America is the sense that he can sort of be his own master, and that he just has this desire to be independent. So I think it really takes its time. It takes the right amount of time, I would say. And again, if you're not into the story, I get it. If you're not like when are they going to leave? Like, this is so stagnant, but I think that's kind of the point,
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really respect about this film, is that it doesn't rush things because it wants you to observe what is really happening with these characters. And I was just thinking, because I probably assuming that those that criticize it are usually the ones that would probably be more exposed or more inclined to the more plot structured films, which I get, because that is the dominant way of storytelling in cinema in the world. But I'm thinking that if the Emigrants did that, it's sacrificing its investment in its characters And for us, it would be more event based, if that makes sense. So like, instead of us focusing on what is happening with them, internally, externally, we would then be more drawn to what's the next plot point, what's the next thing that would happen to them. But with the Emigrants, that trust, it's not lacking with structure. Following the characters patiently is the structure. And that, I think, is a genuine move that it feels motivated within the story, because I cannot see the film really nailing its I think allegiance to its characters if it cut down with that. That investment, it pays off because the film allows us, as the one watching it, to really see what is happening. If one scene feels pointless, no, let's observe, let's look closer. There is something there. And the film's investment in taking the time to explore those moments, that makes it special. I think a more traditional structure would diminish the impact, or like would lessen its richness. It's based on a novel. So it felt novel like.
Oh
It
yeah.
felt a bit episodic, but
Mhm.
that for me works because it makes sense with the story that you're telling.
Yeah, and I think with the first act, even if it takes its time, it still manages to be very watchable, at least in my opinion, by balancing these different storylines. So you have, on the one hand, you have Christina and Karl Oskar, and on the other side, you have Robert and Arvid, I think his name is,
Yep.
and what is happening to them. Then later, I think almost an hour into it, then Daniel is introduced as a new character. So even if the movie takes its time to introduce everybody, it still balances these storylines. And this is probably its biggest tribute, you could say, to traditional filmmaking, that it doesn't demand you to constantly focus on one character and what has happened and their misery, but switches between them. And since they are so different in their ambitions and goals, it keeps you, I don't want to say entertained, but it keeps you engaged with the overall storyline.
I'm thinking of like a modern version of this, how this would be told. And I feel like there would be like flashbacks. Like we would like start on the boat and
Start
we
on the
would
boat, yeah.
right and like go back to each character's existence in Sweden, and it would just be like very back and forth to really try to like keep the audience engaged essentially. But I think it's so smart that it really does make you feel the weight of what these people are doing by seeing what they did before. Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.